Hello, welcome to Bookspin. Today I'm going to do a tag video. This tag is called the Simple Chinese Zodiac Book Tag. And this is something which I've been thinking about doing for a while. I originally found this tag last year on the channel Romeo Talks Books. And the original tag creator was Tim's Too Many Books. So I saw this video on Michael Romeo's channel, and I thought that looks quite interesting. But then I put it on the back burner last year of possible videos to do. And then just a couple of weeks ago, Chinese New Year came around, and I thought now is quite a good time to do it. We're now in the Year of the Dragon. So let's have a look at this tag. So what we have to do is recommend or discuss a book for each of the 12 animals in the Chinese Zodiac. Okay, and it's called the Simple Chinese Zodiac tag because there are more complex versions of this tag out there. But in this case, all you have to do is discuss or recommend a book for each animal. So a book or a story which is related to each animal. It could be a story about the animal, or it could just be the animal appears in the title or on the cover illustration. So it's a pretty flexible sort of tag. And it can include books that you've read or books that you intend to read or would like to read. And I'm going to simplify it further by allowing short stories to be included. It is very flexible, but I did find it's still quite a challenge sort of to think about all of these prompts. So let's have a look. This is a predominantly sci-fi focused channel, of course, so there will be a number of science fiction stories here that I've chosen. But I've also included a few non-SF books just to fill in some of the gaps which I was struggling with. So the first animal in the Chinese Zodiac is the mouse or the rat. Okay, so for this one, I have chosen Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes, which is a classic. I think this came out in the 1950s. It was originally a short story and it was expanded into a novel. And as you can see, there is a mouse on the cover. I haven't read this yet, but I do really want to read this book. It's quite high up in my TBR. It's about a man who has a very low IQ, and he becomes the subject of an experiment in which his intelligence is enhanced and he is transformed into a genius. And Algernon is the name of the mouse, who is the first test subject that precedes him with this technology. So that's where the mouse comes in. The second animal is the ox, right, or the cow. Now this is one category which I really struggled with. It took me ages to think of a story. So in the end, I decided to go for quite an obscure short story. It's a Japanese horror story from this collection called Kaiki, Uncanny Tales from Japan, Volume 2. Okay, now there's a story in this collection which is called The Kudan's Mother. So the Kudan is a yokai, or a spirit from Japanese folklore, with a human face and the body of an ox. So as soon as a Kudan is born, it gives a prophecy of misfortune. So that's quite an interesting sort of piece of folklore, and that's the basis for this story, which is a very weird tale about the Kudan legend. But interestingly, even though it's a horror story based on folklore, the author, who is Sakyo Komatsu, is actually quite a well-known science fiction writer from Japan. I've not read any of his works, but He wrote one novel called Japan Sinks, for example, which I think is some kind of apocalyptic disaster novel. So that could be quite interesting. So that's my category for ox, the Kudan's mother. The next animal is the tiger, which is actually my animal. I was born in the year of the tiger. I don't have a book to show you for this one, but there is a very famous classic sci-fi story, The Star's My Destination, by Alfred Bester, which is also known as Tiger Tiger. That was its original name. It was published under in the UK, Tiger Tiger. I think modern editions now just go by The Star's My Destination. It's a well-known 1950s sci-fi classic. I don't know much about the plot, but I have heard that it's a kind of prototype of cyberpunk, the cyberpunk subgenre. So I don't have a copy of that book, but it's definitely on my radar. And if I find one, I'm picking it up. So the next animal is the rabbit. Okay, this is another one which I really struggled with. I had to think about this one a lot. In the end, I decided to go for Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll, the classic children's story, which is famous for the White Rabbit, of course. So the White Rabbit is a character that appears at the start of the story, and Alice follows him down the rabbit hole into Wonderland. So I don't think I've read this book since my childhood, but it did stay with me. It's got quite strong evocative images in my mind. So Alice's Adventures in Wonderland for the rabbit. But we're going to pause right here, because before we go on to the fifth animal, I'm actually going to insert a bonus category for between the rabbit and the next animal, which is the cat. This is because in the Vietnamese Zodiac, the cat takes the place of the rabbit, because the animals of the Chinese Zodiac are not exclusive to China. It's across East Asia, in other countries like Korea and Japan and Vietnam. They also have these 12 animals. But in the case of Vietnam, for some reason, they replaced the rabbit with the cat. So I've always found that kind of fascinating. So I thought, well, okay, why not put in a bonus question here, a 13th animal, the cat. So when I first thought about this question, at first I was going to choose this book, Cat Sense, by by John Bradshaw, which is actually a non-fiction book about cats, the history of cats, and the history of their domestication, which is a really interesting topic, I think. But as interesting as it is, I think this is perhaps even more interesting, although I haven't read it yet. Catface by Clifford Simak, which is another science fiction book, which I picked up quite recently. I know very little about it, but I don't think it's just got a cat in a title. I think cats do feature in some way. So, in fact, I'll just have a quick look at the blurb here. It says, okay, yeah, an enigmatic cat-faced alien. Okay, so there are definitely cats of some sort in this book. Right. So let's go back to the official list of the Chinese 12 animals of the Chinese Zodiac. And at number 5, we have the dragon, which is this year. Okay. Now, for this one, I've decided to pick a short story, an absolute classic, The Game of Rat and Dragon by Cordwainer Smith in The Rediscovery of Man. Okay, this is another 1950s story. It's a short story. It's one of Cordwainer Smith's most famous stories, and it features some very strange space battles. So the dragons in the story are actually alien spaceships, okay? And in this story, we've got human spaceships who are fighting the dragons, i.e. the alien spaceships, and the human spaceships are powered by cats guided by telepathy. And the cats perceive of the enemy as rats, hence the rat in the title. It's a very weird one. It's classic Cordwainer Smith, and I just realised this would actually qualify for the cat category, and also the mouse or the rat category. So this covers multiple bases, but I'm choosing it for dragon. This is one of my favourite short stories, an absolute classic. Okay, the next animal is the snake. So for this one, I've got another TBR book, Snakeskins by Tim Major. This is a science fiction thriller with themes of rejuvenation and cloning. I've heard that the writer was quite heavily influenced by John Wyndham, so I'm looking forward to reading this one. And this is actually a personally signed copy. So that's Snakeskins. Looking forward to that one. So the next animal is the horse. This was another one which I struggled with for quite a while. In the end, I decided to go for The Tale of the Enchanted Horse from the Arabian Nights. So, this is a book which I often refer to when I'm sort of doing tag videos like this. Because there's so much diversity, there's so much going on in these stories, and they're so magical and wonderful to read. I think The Tale of the Enchanted Horse is one of the most interesting stories from the Arabian Nights. It features a flying horse, but it's not pure fantasy, arguably, because the horse is actually mechanical and is controlled using keys, and it can even fly into outer space. So once you take that concept, it's starting to sound more like science fiction than, a traditional folktale. But it's a great tale, though. It's one of my favourites in this collection, alongside Aladdin and the Wonderful Lamp. The next animal is the sheep, which is sometimes thought of as the ram or the goat. But in this case, I'm saying sheep, and I'm going to choose Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick, which is an absolute classic. This is the first book that I reviewed on this channel when I first started this channel. And it does actually feature an electric sheep in the story. So it's set in a kind of post-apocalyptic world in which most animal species have died out, and owning a real-life animal is a major status symbol. So people often own fake robotic animals as a substitute if they can't afford a real one. And the protagonist in this story owns an electric sheep on the roof of his apartment. So this is a very interesting story, well worth checking out. And the next animal is monkey. Right, so for this one, I've got Planet of the Apes by Pierre Boulle. Now, I know what you're thinking. Apes are not the same as monkeys, and that is very true. But this book just about qualifies, I think, because when this book was first released in the UK, it was called Monkey Planet. Okay, so if we go by that title, it definitely qualifies. Classic 1960s novel again. Also one of my earliest reviews on this channel. Most people are familiar with the movies, the classic 1960s film. I think actually the novel is better than the original film. I really enjoyed that one. So the next animal is the rooster. Okay. Now, in this case, I think it's worth making a cultural note, because normally this animal in English is described as the rooster when we're talking about the Chinese zodiac. But in Chinese, they don't really make a sort of gender distinction. It's just a chicken, right? It's normally symbolized as a rooster, but it could be a hen. It doesn't have to be male or female. So for this one, I have chosen a short story, which I haven't read yet, but I've heard a lot of good things about. And it's called The Ugly Chickens. And it's in the collection Howard Who by Howard Waldrop. And The Ugly Chickens won a Nebula Award for Best Novelette in 1980, and also a World Fantasy Award for Short Fiction in 1981. And this is perhaps Howard Waldrop's best known work. It's a short story about the extinction of the dodo. That's about as much as I know, but I've heard it's really good, and obviously it's won awards. So I'm on the lookout for this book, Howard Who. Sadly, the author died very recently. But yeah, if anyone's read this book or this story, please let me know your thoughts in the comments. Right, so we've just got 2 animals left. The penultimate animal is the dog. Okay, now I thought that there are a few options here. In the end, I've decided to go for a Neil Gaiman story. So, this is a short story collection called Trigger Warning. A lot of great stories in here. All right. And there's a dog on the cover. There is a story within here called Black Dog. So Black Dog is a novella set in the American Gods universe, and this time it's set in England, as we follow Shadow, who's the protagonist from American Gods, on some of his more adventures. I don't know if adventures is the right term, because I've always thought Shadow is quite a passive character who just gets swept up in events. But anyway, it's a great story. I think it's probably my favourite story in this collection. Okay, so that's probably, I would say that's more fantasy than SF. Black Dog by Neil Gaiman. And finally, the last animal is the pig. So for this one, I have chosen Inhibitor Phase by Alistair Reynolds. So, within the Revelation Space universe, we have these people called hyperpigs, right? Which are kind of pig-human hybrids. They're humanoid beings with pig DNA, with human level intelligence. Okay, but they're derived from domestic pigs, ultimately uplifted into sapience through genetic engineering and manipulation. So in this particular novel, we've got a hyperbig character called Scorpio, who is a very important character throughout the original trilogy of Revelation Space. This is actually the 4th book in Revelation Space. Great novel. Okay, so those are all of the animals. 12 animals plus the cat bonus, so that's 13. I thought this was quite a fun tag to do, so please feel free to follow up and do the tag yourself if you're interested. I'm going to tag a few people. I haven't decided who yet, but yeah, feel free to do this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon.